Okay.
Great. I'm so glad
Okay.
you're all here. This is ABE Foundations, the third of three webinars, and we have been just under such great leadership with Rachel Stiglitz, who will introduce herself on the next slide.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Welcome back. So my name is Rachel Stiglitz. I'm an ABE facilitator with Metro East Consortium. I provide intakes and proctor assessments for Mounds View Adult Education and the Ramsey County Correctional Facility. So over the course of this webinar series, you've met staff and representatives from the Minnesota Department of Education and various support networks or network providers. So today, we're fortunate to have with us three people, Kristine Kelly, Rob Podlasek, and Patsy Egan. I'm going to let them each introduce themselves. Kristine?
Hi, everybody. I am Kristine Kelly, and yes, I am the Language and Literacy Coordinator at Atlas. If it has anything to do with reading, writing, language in our Minnesota adult ed system, I have something to do with it, along with amazing colleagues who help me do the work.
And I am Rob Podlasek. I'm the training director for Literacy Minnesota, and Atlas provides training for teachers in Minnesota ABE, and we provide training and support for volunteers in ABE.
And it's a great honor to be with Kristine and Rob on this one. I'm Patsy Egan, and I direct Atlas, and Atlas is charged with doing professional development for the state's workforce, both teachers and administrators alike, as well as support staff. But we leave the volunteers to Literacy Minnesota. So we're glad you're here today to learn about all these different topics.
Thank you. So the main objective for this webinar series is meant to support your individual asynchronous work in the ABE Foundations online course. Either you're taking that right now in Canvas, or you've done that previously and you're just using this webinar series as a refresher. So together, these opportunities are designed to provide a thorough introduction to Minnesota adult basic education. And this includes who we serve, who our students are, our system, policies, and procedures, the three sets of content standards that guide Minnesota adult basic education instruction, as well as opportunities for professional support and growth. So throughout this training, you will hear adult education, adult ed, adult basic education, and ABE. So these are all referring to the same thing. Adult education is a federal term, but adult basic education is used in Minnesota's state statute. Many programs in recent years have shifted from adult basic education to adult education because here we note GED math it's not basic. Okay, it can be hard. I can think of other courses out there like Certified Nursing Assisting, CompTIA, entry-level IT, career certifications. Those can be pretty rigorous. So the adult education system is governed and funded at the federal level, the state level, and the local level to serve and support our students. This is an overview, and in this overview, we will cover the adult education system, policies and accountability, instruction and programming, which includes content standards, distance learning, transitions, IET, which is integrated educational training, and ACP, which is adult career pathways, as well as secondary credentials. We'll also cover volunteers and professional development. So today, we'll do some more welcome and introductions. After that, Kristine will cover content standards. And then after that, Rob's going to cover volunteers in adult basic education. We'll do a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll wrap up. We'll first do professional development with Patsy, and then we'll do a short wrap up. Okay? So as Patsy mentioned earlier, this is the third out of three webinars for this series. On October 1st, we covered the introduction to who our students are, who ABE serves, as well as the secondary credentials that are offered in Minnesota. On October 8th, we also covered the introduction to the adult basic education system, and I covered policy, accountability, and the national reporting system, NRS. So as a quick warm up, those of you guys that are participating in the webinar, drop in the chat a recent success that you have had at work recently. I can share that at the Ramsey County Correctional Facility, last week we had 3 people earn their GED, which is huge. One of them finished right before he got out. So it's a huge success. So, and if anybody wants to share another success, that's great. I'd be happy to hear. Yeah. And it's good to see everybody. Those of you that have come back, like Walter, thank you. Oh, welcome back. And Mary's back too. And she probably tested those 3 guys at the correction facility that earned their GEDs. Great. Anybody want to share a success? Maybe still typing?
I'm trying to think.
I know.
I know. So this week I'm going to be talking, and Patsy referred to it in the chat box. We have a statewide college and career readiness cohort, and it's a year-long PD experience. And we have our first 2-day in-person meeting this week, and I got all the copies made.
Oh, that is a success. Yeah, it's a lot.
It is indeed. This is a big initiative, and Kristine has just managed to get it all ready to go. So it's a big one.
Great.
Yeah, lots of good things happening at Atlas. We're trying to get everything scheduled for next fall. The other thing I was going to mention is we figured out when we're going to have the North Regional next fall, and which was not a small feat given all the religious holidays and school starts and MEA and all the things. So we figured it out.
Okay. Well, we'll keep moving on. If you guys think of a success, drop it in the chat. That's great. No pressure. Okay. So where can I access this information for later? We will be sharing out the PDFs of the slides, so you can click on all the links that we refer to here. As we go through this series, today's webinar, Patsy will be dropping in any websites that we mention as well, but you will be able to access those later. As well, Atlas has an FAQ page, a frequently asked question page for Minnesota adult education. And you can dive a little bit deeper in what we're covering in the webinar series in the ABE Foundations online course in Canvas. Okay. So I'm going to pass the baton on to Kristine so she can introduce you to Minnesota's content standards.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about content standards, which might sound like a dry topic, but it's not, because here in Minnesota, we have made great strides in content standards, and we have actually created here in Minnesota content standard frameworks that are highly respected across the country. So this really is about what we teach in our classes. When I started in adult education in 1997, there was no framework or standards or pre or post testing. We did do placement testing, but we weren't required to. And it was really kind of loose. And so I think that for people coming into the field of adult education now, there's a framework to help us determine what we need to teach and at what levels, and to build what skills. So in this section, I'm going to talk about, just very quickly, the purpose and benefits of content standards. We've got 3 sets of content standards that we are required to implement. And we're going to talk about the ACES TIF framework, which is really a foundational piece that I think we build instruction on, and the skills that students need to do the level of thinking and activities that we ask. We're going to talk about the key instructional shifts in English language arts and in math, according to the college and career readiness standards. We're going to talk about digital literacy just a little bit because it's really important in most of our lives. And we'll take a look at the North Star Digital Literacy Standards. That is a Minnesota homegrown program curriculum, and it's something I think we're really proud of here in adult education. So content standards, what they are. These are really descriptions of what students should know and be able to do. So, depending where you are, especially in the college and career readiness standards, you're going to see an end goal in the standards, but your part of building up to that, is going to be specific depending on what level you're teaching. It's also, content standards are a resource that provides a foundation so that we can design curriculum, so that we can build around skills and strategies that our students need. They're not a curriculum. So in terms of the North Star Digital Literacy Standards, the College and Career Readiness Standards, and the ACES TIF standards, none of them are a curriculum. So you won't find exactly how to teach them. So we have some definite flexibility in how we target these standards. It's not a set of lesson plans. That's what we, that's part of the professional wisdom, practitioner wisdom, where we choose our resources, we design our instruction. They're not meant to be taught cover to cover. They certainly aren't sequential. And we may not cover all the standards in the course of instruction, and that's okay. And it's not a full spectrum of support and interventions. So we know we have multilingual learners. We have learners who may have learning disabilities or other learning challenges. None of that support is built into these standards. We accommodate and modify as instructors do. And also, just because it's not part of these standards doesn't mean it's not something that we should teach. So we have 3 sets of standards, and we're going to talk briefly about each one. And we are going to start by just kind of distilling down the skills, the key skills, and then the standards that represent those key skills. So for basic academic skills, that's really the College and Career Readiness Standards. And that acronym is the CCRS. We also call it the Blue Book. And anything having to do with literacy, whether it's reading, writing, it's language, and math numeracy is in the College and Career Readiness Standards. For transitions, they're often called professional skills or soft skills. I'm not a big fan of the soft skills label because I think they're power skills, because these are often skills, learning strategies and ways to effectively communicate and navigate systems, and these skills that are really essential that often need to go along with academic skills. And then finally, that's the ACES Transitions Integration Framework. We call it TIF, or you'll hear people say TIFFing the lesson. And then we have digital literacy, so the use of technology and teaching our students how to be digitally literate. And that is the North Star Digital Literacy Standards, the NDLS. I don't use that acronym nearly as much as I use TIF and CCRS, but I think some people do. So we have this lovely new visual that we've only had maybe for 6 months. And this graphic, we decided to build this because we wanted something that really represented the fact that these circle everything that we do. In the center, content for teaching and learning. So whether you are teaching a civics class or a citizenship class, or you're teaching a science prep class for GED, or you're teaching a life skills class, or you're teaching pre-CNA, it doesn't matter. we can use these standards in all of the content. So we have in the second ring, we've got the CCRS, the North Star Digital Literacy Standards, and the TIF, and then around the outside, again, that all that we are instructing our adult learners is made up of academic skills, digital literacy skills, and transition skills. So where did they come from? Well, ACEs came here in Minnesota. We're very, very proud of this framework. There is a national framework now called Teaching Skills That Matter, but we were really kind of ahead of the game. And these were developed in 2011 to 2013. They were revised again in 2016. And then very recently, new lesson plans have been added. So that is a Minnesota-grown resource. The College and Career Readiness Standards is not a Minnesota-grown resource, though we have led in a lot of ways with this work. And these were released in 2013 by Octay. These are based on the Common Core. They're almost identical to the Common Core standards for K-12. And then we have the North Star Digital Literacy Standards, again, developed here in Minnesota in 2010 by the St. Paul Literacy Consortium and the St. Paul Public Library. So you are part of a system here in Minnesota that is well respected and has made really meaningful contributions to the national level of adult education. So something to keep in mind is that we are required by WIOA to align to K-12 standards. We know we have K-12 standards from the Minnesota Department of Education. We have language arts standards, we have science standards, we have, math, social studies. Our Minnesota ABE team chose the College and Career Readiness Standards, the Transitions Integration Framework, and North Star as our statewide standards. So to be in alignment with WIOA, these are our three steps. And all ABE programs have to document how they are incorporating these sets of standards. And that usually happens in what we call the 5-year narrative, which is something that programs go through every 5 years. It's a large project, but within that, programs need to demonstrate how in their many courses, classes, levels, they are doing this work. Thank you, Rachel. The Workforce Innovation, I only call it WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. You can be doing this for a long time and still not remember the acronyms. So why are standards beneficial? Well, they're beneficial for students, teachers, and programs. And one of the benefits is they provide a guide to instruction that's based on evidence and research. So we know that standards change. Those of us who've been in education for a long time, we know we've seen all kinds of approaches to education. We've seen different sets of standards, and they will likely always change. But as long as they're based in evidence and research, we should be okay. They also help to close the gap. A lot of our students are looking to get jobs, get better jobs, find careers, move on to college or post-secondary training. Our students may already be college educated from their home countries and want to, continue or start studying in a new field. And we want to close that gap in language literacy and numeracy. They're also beneficial because they provide a common language for educators. We can talk to each other about the standards and what we're doing, and as within a program and between programs. And our students tend to move around, and we want to know, or we want to be able to know that if students stop out for a period of time and then end up in another consortium or another site, we're all kind of working towards the same goals. And it also professionalizes our field. Patsy and I have been to K-12 PD opportunities or conferences, and we can talk the talk of the Common Core. We can talk the shifts. We can talk the math shifts and practices. It's just a common language. So let's talk about ACEs. ACEs, it is another wonderful graphic here. We have 6 areas for the academic, career, and employability skills. And those areas are critical thinking, self-management, navigating systems, learning strategies, effective communication, and developing future pathways. And these, I call these the stepping stone, actually, to the college and career readiness standards, because these are skills that help us learn, that help us work with others, that help us understand how to work through a complex system. We have an ACES TIF Foundations course. You're in ABE Foundations. You can also take ACES TIF Foundations, and there is a link with these slides. You can click on ACES TIF Foundations, and I think that in the chat box, we have a link here where you can enroll in the course, and you can work with Carly, who is the facilitator, and you will get some great feedback from her and learn more about the ACES TIF. We also have some webinars coming up here. Patsy, do you want to say something about these great webinars coming up?
So a very natural next step for those of you doing this ABE Foundations course of 3 webinars would be to do the ACES TIF webinar series that we, timed specifically to come directly after this one, so that you're on a roll going to these webinars, learning about these foundational pieces to adult basic education. ACES is foundational. It is the work that we all are responsible for our learners. And the TIF framework, the Transitions Integration Framework, of course, involves these skills that Kristine chatted about. So the first one's coming up in a couple of weeks, November 12th, and then after that, the 26th, which is that Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and then Tuesday, December 10th. And Stephanie Summers and Heather Turngren will be the ones leading those. They are state leaders in this work, and you will want to meet them for sure. So you're already on a roll with these. I would suggest that you sign up for these as well. Come to one or all. Very similar to this webinar series. If you can't make it to all 3, that's okay, although that is recommended. And I will drop that link here in the chat.
Thank you so much, Patsy. Yes, again, thinking back, to 1997, my whole introduction to adult ed and my orientation to teaching adult ed, I came from high school teaching, was there's a bookshelf, pick a book off of the bookshelf and, find something that looks good and start teaching it. So I would have appreciated a little more of a framework, and we do have this framework now, but again, I like to really emphasize that within these frameworks, we have so much flexibility for the resources that we choose and the lessons that we create and how we teach to these standards. So where can you learn more? There's an ACES TIF online resource library. And if you go into the, I'm not going to right now, but when you go to the Atlas website, thank you, Patsy. You can click on resources and you'll see this wonderful page with all these icons for everything from reading and writing to the CCRS to ACES TIF, cultural competency, just all kinds of resources. So the CCRS, the College and Career Readiness Standards, out of these 3, this is my area. So part of my job, in addition to language and literacy in Minnesota Adult Ed, is I am the state lead for implementation of the College and Career Readiness Standards. And so this is the Blue Book. And I think Minnesota might have been the first state to call it the Blue Book. And I think other people call it the Blue Book now too, around the country. Wouldn't surprise me. What the College and Career Readiness Standards is they are a collection of skills that students need to meet college, career, and community goals. Now, yes, they're called the College and Career Readiness Standards, but Patsy and I have always approached it as not just college and career, but also community, also just adulting and advocating and participating in the community and in activities of citizenship. It's certainly not limited to people who are planning or are post-secondary or having a career. These are basic skills that benefit all adults. So the what are the individual standards in the Blue Book? So we have ELA or English Language Arts standards, and then we have numeracy uh, um, shifts and practices. And so the what are the individual standards. The how are the shifts. We're going to talk about the shifts in both ELA and math also has practices. That helps give us a bit of a roadmap for the how of instruction. And that's really going to be our focus today. You're going to be able to do a deep dive into the college and career readiness standards if you choose to. But for today, we're going to talk really about the how. So we have shifts, and for some people, these were pretty big shifts in how we taught in adult education. And these three shifts really are the starting point, even more than the individual standards, the starting point, text complexity, employing evidence, and building knowledge. So when it comes to text complexity, how are we engaging learners with text that's fairly complex and that they're going to need support to work with? For many of us, we really started to ramp up our text, realizing that students were making greater gains when we put them into some productive, supported struggle, and also a real focus on academic vocabulary. Employing evidence. A lot of us were, let's make personal connections. And what's your opinion? Those are still valid. We still want students to connect and we still want students to reflect, but we also want them to go back into the text and use evidence when they are speaking and writing. And then finally, building knowledge, really increasing the amount of nonfiction that we're using, although literary texts are still great. I always talk about finding a balance, but building some knowledge around topics, which can sometimes seem challenging because can have turbulent attendance and sometimes limited resources. The math instructional shifts are focus, coherence, and rigor. So focus really about going deeper instead of just covering in a shallow way a lot of numeracy concepts, kind of narrowing it down and going deep. Coherence. Again, it's kind of like building knowledge. We're creating some coherence around instruction and really connecting the content together. And then rigor, which is focusing on conceptual understanding in numeracy and procedural skill, which is some of the nuts and bolts, and fluency, but also helping students apply their conceptual understanding, the procedural skill and fluency to real life problem solving and real life tasks. And so instead of just always working with, say, numbers, and here's a page of fractions, add them all, add each, for a problem, add the fractions. And then when you're done with these 25 problems, bring it to me. Yes, there is some procedural skill and fluency we need to use, but we also need to work on problem solving and how we can apply these things. Throughout all of the strands, we have reading, writing, speaking, and listening and language in ELA. And we also have something called reading foundational skills. That's really geared for those teachers who are working with students who are just learning concept of print, just learning the alphabets or very basic phonics, just starting to work with sight words and simple fluency. But in all the strands, the shifts, the text complexity, employing evidence and building knowledge are really the lens. Ask yourself, how am I providing a balance of text? Some more complex than others. How am I asking students to employ evidence? You know, do they have to go up to a picture on a smart board that we're doing from our ventures, you know, book one? And I ask them a question, how, where, you know, for an answer, and they point to the picture. That's evidence, right? How are we doing that? And how are we building knowledge, not just a bunch of disconnected topics, but really building some coherent knowledge? And in the math domains, this covers the number system, algebra, geometry, measurement and data, statistics and probability, and functions. So it's all in there. And when we talk about the math shifts, focus, coherence, and rigor, again, that is the lens. How are we going deep? How is this knowledge or this content connecting to each other? And what is the rigor? Am I balancing the work, the computation, you know, fluency, procedural skill with problem solving? And shifts happen. This is a wonderful picture. This is the Rochester Adult Ed program. They were one of our first programs to go through our state college and career readiness implementation cohort, and they got matching t-shirts that say shifts happen. So this has always been a real favorite of ours, and we like to bring it out to show it really does take a whole team. It takes a whole team, it takes a whole program and meaningful leadership to do this work. So quickly, standards for mathematical practice. You can see these have to do with behaviors that we want students to develop to help their proficiency. So problem solving and reasoning, both abstractly and quantitatively. We want them to be able to articulate their own problem solving techniques and also critique the techniques of others. We want to use lots of models. We want to have lots of tools and strategic ways of using those numeracy tools. Precision. Some of these could easily go for like reading and writing as well. Making use of structure and looking for and expressing regularity and repeated reasoning. So numeracy is a little different in the standards because there are also these practices. In a nutshell, for CCRS math, that the shifts and practices together emphasize this idea that we intentionally create an environment where students can do math, where students can make sense of math ideas. Every one of our students can be a math student. We also have the Red Book, and I'm going to talk about this very, very quickly. You might have seen this in your programs, the English Language Proficiency Standards for Adult Education. So these were written to be kind of a support for the Blue Book. So the Red Book was created particularly for teachers of multilingual learners to provide guidance and support for how to help our students do the heavy lift of the college and career readiness standards. And so in Minnesota, we don't include or the English language proficiency standards aren't part of our 3 content standards framework. However, it can be a very, very helpful tool to kind of really distill the work of the Blue Book. And so one thing to note is if you are giving CASA steps, reading and listening, and these are aligned. You will see alignments with ELP1, ELP4, and this is the document. This is available at Atlas. You can get an electronic copy. If you're in a program and you're working with the Blue Book and incorporating the shifts and the practices, and you are incorporating the standards from the Blue Book, your students are already on track for assessments like CASA steps. So the red book kind of gives access to the blue book. But in Minnesota, we made a decision in 2017 that there's no reason that all of our students can't do the work of the blue book. It's just that we know that our multilingual learners will likely need additional supports or different supports than our native English speakers. You can take the CCRS Foundations course. I facilitate the ELA side and give tons of feedback. We also have a facilitator for the math side. That information is in the chat box, and it is also can be found on the Atlas website. Finally, North Star Digital Literacy Standards. I'm keeping an eye on my time here, so I think I can finish. Digital literacy. The reality in our world is that we need digital literacy skills. And here are a series of great examples. Interacting with the school in terms of, paying for school lunches as a parent, and, managing that account. This is something from Lindsay Poost, our New Mercy Special Projects Coordinator. I know that's her old title. We've recently changed it. Checking in and getting information about her little girl, and getting information from daycare, for example, all that detail that you want about diaper changes and what your child ate and drank. Hiring. A lot of employment opportunities now require an online application. Paychecks. A lot of places people work, they have to log in, or they have to, they have to record their time. They have to request sick time, personal time, all of that through digital means. We look at things like forklifts and the digital literacy skills it takes to operate these machines, because there's so much of it now that's based on technology. Scheduling an appointment. This is, InfoPass. I can't remember what InfoPass is, but I think it has something to do, Patsy, let me know in the chat box if it has to do with naturalization. I can't quite remember, but again,
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Oh, yay. And planning your trip on public transit. My chart, I was just in my chart for my husband the other day. So looking at your test results, making appointments, communicating with your doctor. This is digital now. So digital literacy impacts so much of our lives, and this impacts your life, my life, our students' lives, definitely. So we want to support our students in developing and strengthening these skills. And of course, school. With COVID, a lot of things went online, and we started using a lot more digital platforms. So the North Star Digital Literacy Project, I already mentioned its roots were in St. Paul. First, came the standards, and then these assessments that we can give to test students in multiple areas. And then now testing sites can proctor these assessments, offer certificates, and there's now a curriculum and online learning. And Minnesota, every ABE consortium, your consortium, has a North Star subscription. So you may have to ask around, because all of this is accessible to you for free through state funding. The standards, just a couple examples here. We have essential computer skills. Each one of these is an area that students would be assessed. Essential software skills, using technology in daily life. There are 3 related components. We have the standards, but then there's online learning that students can do. There's curriculum that teachers can use in their own teaching, and also the assessments where students can earn certificates. So there are some great curriculum resources, including ready-to-go lesson plans, and everything you need to incorporate digital literacy is here in these great lesson plans. And many of these lesson plans incorporate the college and career readiness standards. There is a North Star Digital Literacy Foundations course. So there's ABE Foundations, there's ACES TIF Foundations, there's CCRS Foundations and NDSL or NSDL, sorry, Foundations course that you can take, again, self-paced, to really dig into this. And where can you learn more? Another link here, digitalliteracyassessment.org. You can take a look at all of the North Star digital literacy standards and learn more about this amazing resource that North Star is used all over the world. North Star Digital Literacy intersects with CCRS and TIF. Both the College and Career Readiness Standards and the TIF have standards that require digital skills. So there aren't specific digital competencies in the CCRS and the TIF, and that's why North Star Digital Literacy pulls in that piece. A couple more pieces of information here as I finish up. We do have a distance learning policy and TVM, which is the teacher verification model, where we can create digital instruction and be able to claim contact hours for it. And more about that, Elizabeth Bennett is our just kind of our shining star who can answer so many of these questions. Also for adult career pathways, we've got Carly, and you can email her directly, anything to do with adult career pathways, IETs, which is integrated education and training, or workplace literacy. Everyone is always willing to answer questions. And with that, I'm just a teeny bit over. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Rob, who's going to talk about volunteers, because whether you know it or not, volunteers do a tremendous amount in our adult ed programs. So, Rob?
Yeah, welcome. Getting the technology working here. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to use volunteers in adult basic education. So we got the section objectives, and I think we should modify these and say we're going to touch on these things, because obviously we could spend a whole lot of time talking about all of them. But the fact that I have any time to talk about using volunteers in adult basic education is pretty amazing, because not every state around the country really values volunteers the way that Minnesota ABE does. And a lot of states, there's volunteer programs, there are ABE programs, and the two never work together. But as long as I've been in the field, which has been since 1986, Minnesota has a strong value of using volunteers in adult basic education. And one of the ways they do that is by supporting my organization, Literacy Minnesota, to promote and support the use of volunteers in ABE. So we get a supplemental services grant that pays us to support you in using volunteers in your programs and in your classrooms. Just have some pictures here. Volunteer working in one of our ABE classrooms. So by far the most common use of volunteers is as a classroom assistant, going in and working under direction of a teacher. But we also have volunteers leading instruction or working one-on-one. And here's one of our one-on-one volunteers. This was the week that COVID started, everything shut down. And we were like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And he was like, I know what to do. And he got his class all set up virtually. And we were sort of taking notes for him. So volunteers support us, and they also lead us in many ways. Just some numbers you can see from post-pandemic years, 21, 22, 22, 23. You can see those numbers of volunteers ticking up. We are just wrapping up the numbers from last year, and another increase. And so as we come back from the pandemic, as things become more normal, volunteer use gets back to normal. There's some quotes from students about their impression of volunteers. So I enjoy having volunteers come to our class because I get more chances to ask questions. So the opportunity to have individual help is by far the number one benefit that students talk to us about. It is good having volunteers because they help me how to communicate with new people. I used to be shy when I speak English with other people except me classmate, but since they come to my class, they are fine by me. So volunteers provide another voice for them to hear, another set of ears to listen to them, and really a chance to interact with authentic Minnesotans. And ABE teachers are only kind of authentic in Minnesotans. It's the volunteers who are the true people. They speak very good English. I mean, their pronunciation, I like that. I wish to speak very well as them. A lot of pressure. I learned about the way they talk, like street people. And again, it's a difference. There's a difference between talking to your teacher and talking to another member of the community. And then a couple quotes from teachers. Volunteers are amazing. I couldn't run my class without one. Oh, and then volunteers are more work than they are worth. And I put both of those up there. I'm an equal opportunity trainer. Neither of these are absolutely true. It just depends upon the volunteer and the teacher and the class. Sometimes they are invaluable. In other situations, they are more work than they're worth. And it's our job to help you make them worth more, make them invaluable, I guess. So how to do that? First thing is establish your routine. So if you are new to ABE, you're still trying to figure out like, what are these standards again? And how am I supposed to do this? And until you figure out those routines, probably not the best time to bring in volunteers. So don't feel like if you're new, you have to bring in volunteers next week or next month. Wait until you get comfortable with your teaching routine, because then it's easier to pass it off to somebody else or to bring in somebody else for support. Now, this is adult basic education, and sometimes nothing is routine because we have unmanaged attendance, unmanaged enrollment, lots of turbulence. Sometimes it's really hard to establish routines because you never know who's going to show up today or next week or next month. So I will amend that to say, establish your routines as much as possible. But then when you're like, okay, might not be a routine, but I am comfortable with the chaos, then it's time to bring in volunteers. So once you're ready to bring in volunteers, ask a couple questions. The first one is, what am I not able to do in my class right now? So maybe you're not able to provide that one-on-one attention that students would like. Maybe you're not able to differentiate the class into different levels so that you can do fluency activities. Maybe you're not able to do a lot of interactive activities because you have 20 students. So if you break them down into smaller groups, then you can play some games or do activities like that. Maybe you want you're not able to manage that chaos at the beginning of class when everyone's coming in and asking questions and you got new students coming in. So maybe that's the challenge. And then you can ask, so how could a volunteer help? Well, I could have a volunteer provide that one-on-one support to the higher level student, the lower level student, the student who missed yesterday and needs to be caught up. Maybe I can have a volunteer facilitate one of my fluency groups. Maybe I can have a volunteer help students get settled as they come into the class so I can deal with the new students who are coming in. Okay. So lots and lots of different ways to do it. So just some rules about volunteer use in Minnesota. So volunteers, and this is very unique to Minnesota, volunteers can generate contact hours for the program just as teachers can. Brad talked about contact hours and how you generate those. In Minnesota, volunteers can generate them. That's a state policy, a state ABE policy. Your union policy or your school district policy may temper that a bit, but according to Minnesota ABE, volunteers can generate contact hours. Volunteers are required to receive training, and certainly all volunteers need that site-specific orientation, that tour of the building, here's where the restrooms are, here's our risk management policy, here's who to call if you're going to be sick, here's how you find out if there's going to be a snow day. So all of that information. If you have volunteers who are working in non-instructional roles like record keeping or making copies or something like that, then they must receive that site-specific orientation, and then obviously whatever training they need for their job. So here's how to use the copy machine, or here's what I'd like you to say when you call lapsed students to see if they'd be willing to come back into the program. Volunteers who are providing instructional help must receive either 4 or 12 hours of training. So if they are working as a classroom assistant under your direction, then they need 4 hours of training. And if they're leading instruction, then they need to receive 12 hours of training. And those are laid out in the training standards, and there is a link to a webinar where we talk about this in greater detail. So what are some of the resources that Literacy Minnesota provides for working with volunteers? Well, the first thing is we can help you with volunteer recruitment. So when you decide it's time to bring in a volunteer to your classroom and you know what you want them to do, first thing I would do is approach the person who is the designated volunteer coordinator for your program, and you might need to ask around to see who that is, and they can get the process going. If you don't have a volunteer coordinator, then you can contact Literacy Minnesota directly. And what we do is figure out what your volunteer need is, when, what, where, who, and we will post that on our website. And then when people contact us or visit our website, they can look through and find what volunteer opportunities are available. If you are in a greater Minnesota program, it's probably most productive to do your own volunteer recruitment in your own community. If you're in the metro area, or if you're looking for remote volunteers and you don't care where they live, then Literacy Minnesota can be a great support for that. We also provide training to help you meet those training standards and to prepare your volunteers for what they're going to be doing. We offer them in a variety of modalities. We have Zoom webinars like this. We also have asynchronous Canvas courses. We do this new thing called getting together in person and doing a training, which is kind of cool. And then we can always do a by request training for your program. So if you would like us to come out and do an in-person training for your volunteers on, I'm doing one next week on diagnostic reading assessment, we can do that. If you'd like us to come and do a webinar specifically for volunteers, we can do that as well. A good question for Katrina. The person to talk to is Sophie Fawn. Let me type that in the chat box. Yeah, Sophie Fawn, she's the person to talk to. I think by type, there we go. There we go. So just some cherry-picked comments about the value of training. So like most PD in Minnesota, all PD in Minnesota, it is very, very highly regarded. The challenge, of course, is getting people to take it. So really want you to encourage your volunteers to take the training. You can find it at our Literacy Minnesota website, and going to upcoming trainings or looking at the volunteer calendar. These are also available to view on the Atlas event calendar, so a couple places to view them. Another resource that we provide are educator resources. So these are print resources, online resources, specifically designed for volunteers or people using volunteers. And you can view that at the Literacy Minnesota website as well. The one that I will call out is something called tutor tips. So every week we send out a tutor tip to anybody who signs up for the tutor tip list. So it could be a volunteer, it could be one of you. And so it's just a little quick activity idea, a resource idea, a strategy, things like that. And you can read it, you can read it later, or you can delete it, whatever your mood is for at that minute. They're also all archived on our educator resources. So if you just want to go through, you can do a search for fluency activities and it'll pull up. You can do a search for North Star digital literacy activities and it'll pull up all the tutor tips related to that. So just a little mini training for people. And then once a year, we provide a volunteer management conference, and this is for anybody who's in the volunteer coordinator role, or any teachers who are using volunteers, or just anybody who wants to learn more about using volunteers in adult basic education. It is virtual via Zoom, and this year it will be Friday, December 13th, which and starts at 8:30, goes to about 3:30. You can come to any session. You can come to the entire thing. If you want to pick and choose sessions, you can do that as well. We will start out with an awards ceremony. Then we have a keynote presentation by a staff person from MAVA, the Minnesota Alliance for Volunteer Administrators. And they're going to talk about what volunteers are looking for post-pandemic. We've seen a change in what people want. And so they'll be talking about what their research shows. And then following that, we will have 9 breakout sessions, 3 sets of 3, each an hour long. And again, you can go to a strand or you can pick and choose 1 or 2 or 3. And Patsy provided those links in the chat. All right, I'll pause and people have any questions, you can go ahead and chat those out. Otherwise, I think we're ready for our short break.
I'm not seeing any questions, Rob.
Short break.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Yep, I'll start the break and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Kristine.
Thanks, Rob.
Time! It's break time! Come on! Everybody! It's break time! Take a break. It's break time. Take a break.
Okay, welcome back. Is Patsy, are you back on?
Yes, I sure
Okay,
am.
great. So Patsy's going to be covering professional development. That's what's next.
Yeah.
Great.
So thank you so much for um, being part of this webinar. And as we come to the last portion here, let me see if my tech is on. Oh, no, not that. We don't want the song again. There we go. We're going to start talking a little bit about professional development, which is my wheelhouse. That's where Kristine and I spend all of our time, is in professional development. So we're going to go ahead and think through some of the things that we'll be talking about in the next little bit here. And that's to identify some of the providers that work within this Minnesota ABE support network. Atlas is one of several agencies that do professional development for teachers, and then also some opportunities that you all have for further professional development. So the first thing, and Rachel, I don't know if you would be able to drop the note in that. Maybe I can grab it here. See if I can do two things at once. I think I can. The PD catalog, here we go, is something that we want to just be sure people are aware of. The PD catalog, kind of like when you were in college and you had a schedule of what's being offered right away, like this semester, that's our events calendar. The catalog is like the whole course description that you might have. So every course ever offered, and that's the PD catalog. So everything imaginable is already there. And just to give you a sense of what's involved with that then. So 3% of the state ABE funding is used to support adult basic education. So not directly to programs, but for support network providers like us. And that shows up as grants. Atlas has one of these grants to provide assistance in a few different ways. And I want to talk through what those look like. So there's several support network providers. Atlas, as you see, is just one. One is Southwest ABE, and Southwest ABE provides work around assessment. So if you have any questions about CASAS or TABE or Best Plus, like that, those are your people. Southwest ABE and Marty Olson are the ones who handle assessment training. So again, all of these are professional development providers specializing in assessment, Southwest ABE. Also, we have the Literacy Little Minnesota, which you've already been introduced to, which provides volunteer training. And then Atlas, as you know, and I'll say a little bit more. Panda, we've not spoken of much before, but I want to be sure people are aware of it. And so we're going to go through a little bit for each of these so you can see. I'll just give me a brief overview here. Has more to do with disabilities. And then LAN is at the legislative level. So let's take a look at these. So for Atlas, we provide professional development and resources. That's our mission, to advance education for adult learners. And I'll be talking a little bit more later about what specifically that looks like. LAN, in a nutshell, hosts a statewide conference. So if you've heard of the Summer Institute in August, they are the ones who put on that event. And they also do a great deal of work, as I mentioned, at the legislative level, working on statewide initiatives, working with policymakers, so state and federal government lawmakers, making sure people are aware of when there's an important vote on the floor and how you might be able to impact what our representatives think about adult education and how they vote on funding for it, for example. They also have been very helpful in putting together some marketing efforts, photographs that programs can use that have the permission of the learners, for example, to use in their promotional materials. Literacy Minnesota, as Rob pointed out earlier, does the volunteer training. They also have a separate grant for technology training, so that the North Star work is done through Literacy Minnesota. And Elizabeth Bennett, it works for Literacy Minnesota. We mentioned her earlier. Panda then is the provider around disabilities. So anything physical and non-apparent is what it stands for. Minnesota Adult Education Physical and Non-Apparent Disability Assistance. And so they have just a host of information, resources, and actually a checkout library where you can get some things that might help your students who are deaf or hard of hearing, or for your students who are visually impaired, or students that perhaps need something else that can help them be more successful in the classroom. And then Panda, in particular Wendy Sweeney, does a lot of training as well. And then, as I mentioned, here's the assessment folks here at Southwest ABE, and a second grant that Southwest ABE manages, the Racial Equity Grant. And that grant has been going for let's see, this must be the 4th year now, and that they've been doing a great deal of work finding out what is going on as far as racial equity in adult basic education and what are some next steps, as well as some training around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we do have a staff training policy in Minnesota. The policy is that and this is a statewide policy, ABE Foundations, which is the full course. You're in sort of a shortened version with this webinar series. The full online course or ABE Foundations in person is required for all full-time staff within the first year of hire. We encourage people to do it within the first 6 months, but we also recognize that sometimes people are quite part-time and that might not be feasible. But within the first year, everyone should do the full ABE Foundations experience. There are a couple of exemptions. One is if there's a staff member who's worked in adult education prior to July 1st, so this went into effect on July 1st, and then staff that have successfully completed the Hamline University graduate course, which is called EDUC 7601, which is an introduction to adult basic education. Because the content is a graduate level I think it's 3-credit course that spans a full semester introducing people to the field. We thought if people have completed that course, they do not need to complete ABE Foundations, although still not a bad idea. The staff training policy also has these pieces. So required before you implement them, you do need to complete CASAS implementation training. And that is something that's done every 5 years. TABE is the same way. Distance and blended learning basics online course is another required before you actually provide that. And then before you can do TVM, which is the teacher verification model, it's a way of earning proxy hours for students for online developed content. You do need to complete that certification before implementing. And then there's the Standard Adult Diploma 101 training. And this is for those programs, and maybe your program has it or maybe not, who is offering the statewide adult diploma. There is a 101 training that staff need to be able to have said they've completed before implementing that work. So you can see there's a little more detail here. I'll let you read. So as far as training policy documentation, the trainings by this policy must be entered as part of your history as a SID record. If you're unclear what that means, feel free to put it in the chat. Rachel or I can help you with those questions. I don't want to dwell too much because I'm not sure how much people who are on this webinar have to work with that. But MDE does recommend that all trainings be documented in SID as well, but it's not required. We can't make you do that, but it's not a bad idea because then you keep track and you don't come back years later and wonder, did I do that or didn't I do that or when did I complete that? And then starting just this August, Consortia will be required to use SID to report all the required staff training participation with their annual reporting submissions. So we're starting to get a little more strict about how that's done, mostly because programs, there's a lot of turnover and people lose track of what's been done. And we want to be sure people are complying with that policy. How to do proxy hours. I'm going to hold for one moment, but then Rachel maybe can say more about how to do proxy hours. Linessa's question in the chat is a good one. All right, so I do want to take you to the Atlas website. I'll just show you a few things here, just so you already registered for these webinars, so you have all been on the website before. But there are a few things I want to just point out. So let me see if I can do that from here, Rachel, or do you need to do it? Do you know? Hold on one second.
You're trying to get the
Yeah, I
website?
just wanted to go to the website, but I can also just share my screen too.
Yeah.
Or you can take control back and just go to the
Yeah.
Atlas website.
So you want that? Okay, let's just do that.
Yeah, let's just do that. Sorry,
And,
friends, we didn't think through that point.
Yeah.
So
Is this where you want to be?
Perfect. And I'll just tell you where to go if you don't mind.
Okay.
So here you are in the Atlas website. Of course, you've all been here to register for today's webinar. So you've been to the events calendar at least. What you might not know is all of the things that Atlas provides. And as the main professional developer for Minnesota ABE, I just want to make sure folks know. So if you'll jump on key activities, we'll just see the scope of things that are available. So you can see all these little circles, the ACES transitions work that Kristine spoke about earlier. We also do professional development specifically for administrators, for managers of programs. We have a person whose whole job is adult career pathways and transitions work. The CCR standards you were introduced to earlier with Kristine, we have a place for all of that work. We also are doing some work, and there's some affinity groups later this month around college and ABE partnerships. There is a cultural competency section of the website and activities regarding that. So we do professional development. That there is a state, if you're a licensed teacher, there's a state requirement. As you relicense, you have to finish a requirement around cultural competency, and we're offering that requirement in February. We do a lot around ESL. That's my wheelhouse. I came out of ESL classrooms. And then Rachel's been helping us, of course, with this work, which is ABE Foundations, the Minnesota Adult Ed Standards. And then scrolling down just a smidge so we can see there's also a lot of work around numeracy. So Lindsay Poost is our numeracy coordinator. She develops and designs much of the PD around math. The one-room schoolhouse, many of you may work in a context that has lots of levels or is a drop-in or a lab setting. So lots happening in your classrooms all at once. And we recognize that that is a unique challenge to teaching. So we do some professional development around that. And then, of course, Kristine's wheelhouse of reading and writing. So that's the scope of all the things that Atlas touches on. And then if you just click over to resources, just so people can see, basically you see all of our resource libraries, which are developed, they look very much like what you just saw. They're just organized slightly differently. And then as Rachel's pointing out, you can search for things as far as the types of things, the topic, and it'll help you find what you're looking for. So there's lots of ways to find lots of good stuff. Great, thank you. So yeah, we'll go back to the slides here.
Okay, thank you. I'll make it bigger.
Perfect. And then I think I can take over if all of our stars have aligned here. Yeah, okay. So one of the things we want to point out are the ABE Foundations FAQs, and those simply offer kind of a map for what you might do next, although we did mention that the ACES TIF Foundations webinar series might be a really good, easy, logical next step since you're kind of in the zone of attending webinars every couple of weeks. So those are available on the website. I just pointed out where those are. And then also, we've got the events calendar, which all of you were a part of already in order to join us today. But all of the events, I want to point out, they're not just Atlas events. So Rob's events are on there, Panda's events are on there. Anything that around CASAS and TABE is also going to be in that one calendar. A few years ago, maybe 8 years ago now, we consolidated so that everyone wasn't running their own newsletter and their own events calendar, and we tried to put it all in one place for folks. We do want to mention that there is a unique opportunity coming up. And if you are new to your position, regardless of what kind of position is, whether it's teaching or coordinating, something related to digital literacy, perhaps you're in a support staff role, we are doing another mentorship experience starting in February. So it's a great time to fill out an application for that. The experience is such that what we do is we have one live, it's virtual, but live day where we have everyone who's being paired up is together and do some introduction to the work. And then it's up to you and the mentor or mentee that you've been matched with to decide how you're going to continue forward for a few weeks. So it's basically a 12-week experience, and sometimes people meet very frequently, sometimes they don't, sometimes they visit each other. We have some money set aside to help with some travel costs and such. But it's been really great. We've had 2 so far, 2 cohorts, and we're doing another one in February. And it's a way to get a little bit of a big brother, big sister kind of situation. You have someone who's been in whatever kind of role you have already and has some expertise to share, and you come in with whatever questions and puzzles that you have, and there's someone who can help you out. We recognize, yeah, manager mentorship for sure, Katrina. In fact, that's a big one. Is people who are new to a management role, wow, it's a lot to learn. And why not talk to someone who's been doing it for a few years, right? We definitely see this as a reciprocal relationship. So what we have found, and there's some testimonial on the website, when you go to that applications page, you'll see a link to a video, that the mentees and mentors are both learning the whole time. In fact, sometimes the mentors feel like they learned more than their mentee did. There's a lot of being exchanged. And for mentors, what we have found is, as they're articulating why they do what they do and how they move through their week, and how they design their instruction, for example, they're having to articulate themselves, oh, why do I do it that way? And that has been greatly beneficial. So something to check out for sure. ABE Connect, I'll drop that link in a moment, but this is the newsletter. So every Tuesday, there's a newsletter in your inbox. It's got all the upcoming events listed, as well as some quick news flashes, like 1 paragraph each of things you should be aware of, and then 3 or 4 larger articles that are written from your colleagues in the field about any number of topics. I've written a bunch, Kristine's written a bunch, Rob has, so all of us contribute, the supplemental service grantees, as well as a lot of your colleagues just out in the world teaching in adult basic education. When we hear something cool is going on, like I'm thinking of a really neat writing magazine project done up in the north suburbs, we asked that person to please write it up so that other people could see it. So that's available. You can also search that newsletter for past articles and find out all sorts of good stuff. There's been a series coming up here with the election soon of how to kind of work through critical literacy and election prep, if you will.
I dropped the link in the chat for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Again, I want to mention that PD catalog. That's a place where all the things are listed. So if you see something there, like a study circle, that you don't see it in the events calendar, this is where you might be able to find something you want. And then there's a contact listed. So for example, if you are really someone who wants to get more into trauma-informed practice, and you see in the PD catalog, oh, there's a trauma-informed practices study circle. When's that going to be offered next? The contact information will be there, and you can find out exactly when that will be, or we'll find out you're interested and we'll put it together. So this is a way for us to talk to the field. The YouTube channel. All right. When you have finished Netflix, you're going to want to move to this channel. So the Minnesota Adult Basic Education Professional Development YouTube channel has been in effect for a few years now. And everything we record, including today's webinar, will be up there. So anything you may have missed, if there was a webinar you couldn't get to, you were in the classroom or you had a meeting or you weren't working that day, if it was recorded, it'll be here. And so that's a tremendous opportunity to just find past wisdom that has been shared. And there's also an opportunity to earn CEUs for watching recordings. That if you're curious about that, let me know and I can help with that. It's listed on the Atlas website. Whenever we have a conference, a virtual conference, and the sessions are recorded, we create a playlist. For example, Language and Literacy 2024 was in January. It was virtual. It was amazing. We had these wonderful keynote presenters and so many concurrent workshops. Everything was recorded. There's a playlist. You can go in right now and see all of those past presentations. And then I do want to mention that if you are interested in a license, there is an opportunity to earn that at Hamline University. We are, in fact, the only institution in Minnesota that offers the ABE license, the state-issued license. We also have a number of certificate programs and master's degree programs. So lots of good things available here. I'll drop a link to an article that'll help you find more information about it. And I definitely would suggest people moving through that program. If a license or a master's degree is in your future, check it out. See if this is the right spot for you. I teach in that program. Rachel's been through some of that coursework. There's a lot of your colleagues have taken a class or two at Hamline at one point or another. So finally, make sure I'm in the right spot here. It's a little slow moving slides. Hold on. I'm like, go back, go back. It skipped right over that previous slide, Rachel. I'm not sure why.
Okay, let's try. This
Oh,
one, oh, here we are. Here we are.
there it
Is
is.
this where you
Sorry,
want to
thank
be?
you.
Okay.
That is exactly where I want to be. So we do have this tool, which is the FY25 that just refers to fiscal year 25, which is we run to June, July 1 to June 30th. So we're in FY25 right now. There is a professional development overview, and I'll drop that in the chat in a moment, as well as an announcements doc. So this announcements doc is particularly important because we update it all the time. So you can see that here now. Hopefully that's two different things here. Make sure that it dropped okay. What you can see is this overview that you see on the screen, and just like what's coming up, what should I make sure I have time for this winter, what can wait that you're doing next spring. This is a helpful overview to have. In the announcements document, it was updated just again last week. We list everything that's just coming that you might want to save the date for, as well as some things that are ongoing, like the mentorship and the Canvas courses. And then finally, I think it's finally, is Math Institute. And I want to be sure people know that that is happening, as well as the Language and Literacy Institute. So Math Institute is Friday, November 8th. It's virtual. We have 3 national speakers coming. They're going to be really awesome. We're really excited about this one. We have Dr. Brooke Eastos, Amy Vickers, who used to teach for Minneapolis, who's now joining us from Wisconsin, and Sarah Lonberg Liu are speaking, and they are nationally known math educators for adults, and they have made time to be with us today on the 8th. And then in the afternoon are several concurrent sessions from your math teaching colleagues here in Minnesota. And then on January 23rd and 24th, just so you're aware and can block off this time you are not going to want to miss, the Language and Literacy Institute will be in Bloomington. So this one's nice if you haven't had a chance to meet too many other adult educators outside of your program. This would be a great opportunity. It's a beautiful space. We're doing a really interesting program. We've got CCRS Math Foundation, CCRS ELA Foundations is available in person. Both of those are, as well as if you work with emergent readers. So those readers who don't read or write yet in their first language and are learning to speak, read, and write in English. We have a speaker coming specifically for that, as well as an array of smaller workshops. Those are the biggies. I'll see if we missed any links, Rachel, but I'll let you wrap us up here.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if I can get my video back on here. Okay, here I go. Okay. So, Lanessa had a really great question about, let's go back to Lanessa's question. So, yeah, she really wants to know about proxy hours with Literacy Minnesota website. And so let me just show you quickly how you can find that. Literacy, there it is. And it's pretty easy. Here we go. So you're on the Literacy Minnesota website. You're going to want to go to, let's see here, educator resources, distance learning platforms, okay? And then you just put in the platforms you want. You can search here, or I'll just pick one up here, say Edmonton. And then they kind of have a little brief thing about it, but if you scroll down here, it talks about proxy hours. And here it tells you what you need to do, how you need to count hours. Like some places here, it's really direct. Like Burlington is one that, when you run a report, you don't have to add any additional time or any formula. So what you just need to do is go to what you're looking for on this website, and it'll like take you to, what you want to, like, the proxy hour information that you're looking for. I hope that's helpful. It's just going to the distance learning platforms under educator resources, and I'll just put in another one. So here we are. So you can see that. Okay. A little brief description tells you CASAS scores. This would be for steps, and then learn more. And then so they even more information about this website as well, or learning platform, and then the proxy hour information here. Okay. So it really just depends on the platform itself to give you some information about how to count proxy hours. Okay. So we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to skip this question. I hope you took a lot away from today. So following up, you will be emailed the recording for this webinar, as well as PDF slides of what we shared today. In those slides, you'll be able to access all the links that we referenced, okay? And then there will be an evaluation link that that you be receiving as well. Give us some feedback. Let us know what's working, what's not, so we can, be better informative and, just do better in the future. And as well, you will earn continuing education units reflecting your participation in this webinar series. So if you were able to meet 2 of those webinars, you'll get CEUs for those 2. All 3, you'll get more, and so on. And let me see. I've seen some things in chat. So yeah, Patsy's dropping things in chat. And that's it. If anybody has any questions, turn on your mics, let us know, drop things in the chat, but otherwise we're finished with today. Thank you. Thanks, Mandeep. It's good to see you. Thanks for everybody for joining us. It's been really nice. I really appreciate it. And Carol's saying that she wished to know about this last year. If you weren't able to make all the webinars, these 3 will be on the YouTube channel too. Okay, so if you missed one, you can always show up for another one. Oh, and Mary's saying hi. It's good to see Mary. I work with her at the correctional facility.
Oh, great. All right. Well, thanks everyone. And a big thank you to Rob and Kristine for their work, and especially to Rachel for doing all 3 of these. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. I'll stop the recording.